Greetings to you all fellow travelers. This is Krotnip, welcoming you all back to the logbook of a simple lindworm traveler. As of late, I've been churning out the last remaining unit focus pieces for the northern tribes, and there aren't that many left. Originally I was intending to do Mounted Wrathmane next, and the piece is all but recorded, otherwise it's done at this point. But then inspiration struck me and I decided to take a break from the more standard type of video, and this week I want to do something of a rant. So instead of looking at a single Northern Tribes unit, we are actually going to be looking at two today. This is the tale of the Jarl and the Hersir from Brynjalmar. So how on earth did this piece come to be? I was lying awake, staring at the ceiling just the other night, thinking about Warcrow, like I'm sure all the normal people do when they can't sleep, and my mind drifted to Ahlwardt Ice Bear. He's a gorgeous model, and he's an important part of the backstory of Warcrow universe, and the story of the northern tribes as we see them on the field of battle also. But unfortunately, among us players who have been playing a bit more and haven't just started the game, Ahlwardt has already garnered himself something of a poor reputation as being someone who isn't unfortunately a competitive a choice if you are looking the best value out of your points investment and the opportunity cost involved in fielding him in your company. But being a self-proclaimed analyst of the game and student of the game of Warcrow, I wanted to do my own research on the subject beyond simply playing Ahlwardt a few times. So I wanted to devise an analysis that could allow me to take a more cold and sober look on whether Ahlwardt was actually worth the reputation that he has started to build for himself. So what I decided to do, since comparing apples to oranges is very much a no-no when it comes to war games also, was to find the closest in-faction comparable model to our great Jarl, and then compare the two to see if I could isolate what makes Ahlwardt better or worse than the model I'll be comparing to, and then I would use this granular analysis as a way of determining in the end via some type of scoring system whether Ahlwardt is as not great as his reputation seems to imply as of right now. At the end of the day, it was quite easy to find a model that was quite close to Ahlwardt in many cases in Njord the Merciless, the Hersir from Brynjalmar, and as I proceeded with the analysis, my decision to use him as the point of comparison became more and more legitimate, as you are about to see going forward. Before venturing any further into the methodology that I'm looking to leverage here today, let's get something straight. I absolutely adore Warcrow, and I think it's an amazing game, and I really can't say enough nice things about the profile designs that we have seen so far. I don't know if it's their accumulated experience with Infinity and other games, or if it's partially due to the next generation mechanics involved in the game of Warcrow when we take a look at it against something like Infinity. but the profiles that have been released to Warcrow so far seem to be extremely well balanced competitively, and there is so much character in the different units that we have access to so far, and they really play differently to one another. So let's take a moment to appreciate all the work that Korvuspelli has done, and I for one have extremely short a list of only a handful of profiles that I don't feel like are competitively all that viable at the moment, so please don't take this video as a criticism of what Korvuspelli is doing, but rather, as you should, a bored wargamer's subjective rant on a single model whose fate is close to his heart. Okay, with that caveat out of the way, let's talk methodology. I was thinking that a very fun and easy to follow way to do the analysis and keep up with it would be to go through every different category that I can think of when it comes to analyzing Ahlwardt, Ice Bear and Njord the Merciless compared to one another, and then seeing which model comes out on top in each category involved. Once the victor is determined, I will then award points to the victor based on how soundly they were able to outperform their rival in the category in question. And this should allow us to keep a running score on which model the analysis seems to prefer as the more powerful one. And we can get some type of numerical value on how big the difference ends up being once everything is said and done. Out of all the possible ways that I could create the models, I ended up using a very small scale system that you see below. Obviously, some real academic could have made do with a better system, but I wanted to stick with something that was had only a few steps on it, so as to not get too granular with how many points we are awarding, and giving out half points I think also reflects how small the difference between the two models can at times be. So if I end a part of the analysis by throwing out a 0 on the board, it means that Ahlwardt and Njord are basically as powerful in that regard, or as good in that regard when compared to one another. Obviously, in many cases we are talking about a side grade type situation where one model has some type of advantage, but the other has a advantage that I assess to be pretty much equal, so that kind of cancels itself out. If I'm providing one model with 0.5 points, that means that they are ever so slightly better than the other, but in a way that can be said, in all honesty, to be a noticeable difference of the smallest margins. If I'm awarding a model a whole point, that means that they are clearly better than their comparison. If a model gets 1.5, then they are clearly superior in the aspect that we are looking at. And if I ever decide to give a model 2 points, that means that they blow their competitor right out of the water in the category that we are discussing. Okay, with all this preamble done, let's get to the actual analysis itself, shall we? Let's start with cost and command tokens that I have gathered on this one slide, but as two different entries, mind you. Here we have the two unit cards taken from the fan-built Warcrow army builder. A huge thanks to Tikpalang and everyone else involved in this project. I don't know how I would have managed all my videos with the limited amount of time I have available if this amazing resource had not been usable to me all these months while we have been waiting for a official army builder. And to be totally honest, from what I see, I so far prefer the usability of Tick Balance version, but don't tell anyone. Shh, it's a secret. If we then start our analysis on the cost, this is where a really big and clear difference immediately comes in. Njord costs 40 points, which is a really hefty investment in a Northern Tribes force. For 40 points you could get a whole unit of battle scarred. You could get yourself a mounted Wrathmane, or I think the closest comparison to Njord these days is the Orc Revenant, also coming in at 40 points. So not cheap by any stretch of the imagination, but pretty much nothing compared to the cost of Ahlwardt Ice Bear. Ahlwardt is the single most expensive Northern Tribes option out there, coming in at the massive cost of 60 points. With this cost attached, Ahlwardt should be by far the most powerful single unit choice or piece that the Northern Tribes faction has access to, and it shouldn't even be a close comparison to the next best thing. The fact that Njord costs only 2/3 of what Ahlwardt does should mean a decisive advantage on the side of Njord when it comes to analyzing the score or scoring the analysis that we are performing here today. So I would be willing to go as far as to give the maximum amount of points, that is +2 to Njord for the cost difference between him and Ahlwardt Ice Bear. But I don't want the cost analysis to veer us off the course of trying to compare these two models as if they were like to like. And I don't want the question of cost to illegitimize what I'm trying to do here. So as I'm feeling extremely generous towards Ahlwardt and wanting to keep the integrity of this analysis for as long as that's possible, I'm actually going to strike out these 2 points and not count them towards the advantage of Njord the Merciless going forward. And let's see how this ends up affecting the end score once we get there. The second thing that we are analyzing on this particular case is the command tokens available to the models, and as you can see, both of the models in question do bring 2, and both also share a very similar attitude towards the command tokens they bring, I feel. Both have access to once per round damage mitigation related command skill, so both will be using those command tokens opportunistically when they need them, but there might be games when they don't need to spend any and the force can make use of them instead. As a result, this category is going to be a solid 0, so tie between our Varank heroes. Interestingly enough, now that I look at the pictures before us, it would seem that Ahlwardt's command tokens are placed right under the cost, while Njord's are based at the bottom of his banner. Quite interesting editorial decision that has been changed at some point, it would seem. In the next category, let us take a look at the stats block for both of our Varank characters. At this point of the analysis, I was starting to feel very good about choosing these two particular models to compare to one another, because as you can see, aside from 2 distinct differences, the profiles, the stats blocks of these 2 models are exactly the same. The movement value, morale, availability of the 2 characters are exactly the same. but Ahlwardt has a single wound more than Njord, which can make him more survivable under certain circumstances, and he also benefits from a higher willpower score thanks to having 2 orange for willpower against Njord's an orange and a yellow. Then again, when it comes to the willpower value of a unit with Berserker Rage, I don't think it's all that important when compared to a unit that does not have access to this keyword, since a Berserker Rage unit can always suffer a wound to add a success to their willpower roll, thus helping them pass those all important tests if and when they come along. The difference between Njord and Ahlwardt in this regard is not big, but it is a difference, so I'm awarding Ahlwardt 0.5 points from the stats category, which places him in a steady lead at 0.5 points to 0 after the second category is all said and done. Let's get next to the characteristics and keywords section, and if we start with the former, both Njord and Ahlwardt are Varang characters. The only difference when it comes to the characteristics of these two units is that Ahlwardt is unfortunately a high command option. I say unfortunately because high command forces you to make Ahlwardt the leader of your company, which can limit your options in certain situations, like if you are playing the feat decapitation, and also bringing Ahlwardt locks out all the other high command options out there. As of the release of this video in October 2025, that effectively means Aalborg, Wrathmane and the Mounted Wrathmane. So this is obviously going to be a category that favors Njord, but with the small margin of him not being a high command, so 0.5 points to the left corner, I suppose. Then when we look at the keywords section of our characters over here, we see that both of them benefit from the Berserker Rage ability, as already stated in the previous discussion point, and they are also both elite. For those at home, elite means that these characters can, before advancing to the switches step, exchange any hollow symbols in their rolls for solid ones. This actually means that the willpower difference between the two models is even smaller than what we discussed earlier, because the yellow dice has 2 facings with hollow successes on them, and the orange dice only has 1. So the difference between elite models rolling 2 orange or an orange and a yellow when it comes to willpower is the tiniest possible imaginable. When it comes to the differences in the keyword category, Ahlwardt has Dispel, while Njord has access to better join unit options. If we start with Dispel, this is something that Ahlwardt can access, and it allows him to roll a blue and a black dice to try and block a spell targeted directly at him. Unfortunately, if Ahlwardt joins a unit, the Dispel keyword is not transferred over, so it's only usable when our legendary Jarl is fighting on his own. I have played my share of models with Dispel in Northern Tribes, that is Ahlwardt, Wounded Aalborg, the adventures characters before they became tournament illegal, and I have also run the Varang Tattooist that grants a force white blue dice Dispel to all Varang models, and in all honesty I have to say that I'm afraid I can't remember a single time that Dispel would have had a material impact on how things turned out on the field. Yes, we are going to be seeing more spell casting going forward, so it's bound to become come in handy at times, but at the same time I have no choice in my analysis but to conclude that this spell is a very situational keyword that rarely comes in any big way. But what does come in a big way every single time is what types of units your characters are able or not able to join. And this is part of the keywords category that really hurts Ahlwardt. Ahlwardt can only ever join a unit of skin changers, and actually the situation is even worse than it sounds, because the unit that Ahlwardt joins has to choose the in my opinion far lesser of the totems available to them in the totem of the polar bear. This means that your Ahlwardt-led skin changers have to trek through the entire field in order to get to their enemies, and they are unable to make use of the scout keyword of the Arctic Fox totemed skin changers. And also at their weak, non-existent base conquest value, the unit isn't much of a backline guard either. Not that you would want to use a nearly 100 points of your force to guard a backline objective, mind you. On the other hand, Njord is able to join all rank infantry units, which means that he can also join the skin changers without making any distinction between what totems they choose to apply. If you are feeling extremely adventurous, you can add Njord to a unit of Ice Archers. Remember that Berserker Rage that he grants his unit, more on that later, also applies to ranged attacks. And also he can join a unit of Tundra Marauders, which are one of the prime ways of escorting the blood axe that Njord is fielding to the faces of your opponent's most important pieces in record time, thanks to Scout and the Snow Leopard tattoo. In addition to this, if you choose to include Aalborg as your high command, Njord gets even more flexibility when it comes to the units that he can join, since this will allow him to also join orc infantry units. I was teetering on whether the fact that Ahlwardt can only join this very strict one type of unit should count again and again against Ahlwardt when we get down to the section where we discuss the attached version, but I decided that that would also tilt the scales too decisively in Njord's favor in the long run, so I'm choosing to penalize Ahlwardt in this category and this category only for his poor unit joining options, so that we can maintain the integrity of the different analysis sections going forward. So mostly based on the poor join options of Ahlwardt and the far superior ones available to Njord, I'm going to be giving 0.5 points to Njord when it comes to the keywords section. This brings our total score to 2 to 0.5. Luckily for our Ice Bear, it's next time to talk about offense, and this is something of a place where Ahlwardt can reassert himself over his underling. In the a bit convoluted numbers that I have presented before you over here, I have been trying to represent the average base damage of both Njord and Ahlwardt, green being Njord and blue being Ahlwardt. The next number is the average damage when pushing for extra performance, and then in the brackets we get the amount of that damage that is automatic wounds inflicted by the model. And as we can see from this convoluted analysis, Ahlwardt benefits from higher average effective damage output when not pushing, higher effective average damage output when pushing for extra performance, and his damage infliction is also more heavily geared towards inflicting automatic wounds, which is usually a better way to deal damage since it bypasses your opponent's defense. One has to remember though that if you are overwhelming your opponent's blocks and you are able to push through success-based damage, then the automatic wounds are not of particularly high value. They will count exactly the same as you would a normal success. And also there are some niche cases where your opponent is for whatever reason particularly resistant to automatic wound infliction, as is the case with a unit that's been joined by the war surgeon of the hegemony. At least as of the release of this video, I think the FAQ entry on how that particular interaction works is a silly one, and I hope there's going to be a change on that in the near future. Njord's average damage output also includes an element that removes blocks from the defender, and this will usually result in his case no diminishing returns, because the enemy is usually rolling or producing some blocks against him, and he isn't going to be triggering that switch all that many times. But if there is a case where the enemy fails to roll enough blocks to be cancelled by Njord's double special switch, then his effective average damage output actually goes down, while Ahlwardt does not suffer such an impairment of performance thanks to the fact that his switch ability inflicts automatic wounds rather than cancels blocks. This means that in the offense category, I'm willing to give Ahlwardt a clear advantage. Please do note, however, that I am not calculating the additional damage improvement methods that Njord has access to onto the analysis about offense. I'm just talking about the base offense that the profile can produce as is. And as we are about to see, Ahlwardt has no way of improving his offense beyond what you see here, while Njord actually does. So after this section is completed, Njord's lead has been cut to 0.5 points only. Maybe the Ice Bear isn't as bad as his reputation would paint him to be. Next we advance to the next logical category of defense, and here we see that Njord is rolling a single blue dice more than Ahlwardt, so he's slightly more effective at defending than his fearsome leader is. At the same time, Ahlwardt does have a defensive switch that allows him to turn special symbols, and that is essentially all special symbols, also hollow ones because of elite, into return damage against his attackers. While this does seem like a powerful ability at a first glance, the green dice is terrible at providing special symbols, so you aren't going to be getting a whole lot of power out of this usually. Both models also have access to a quote-unquote defensive push modifier that actually simply serves to add more retaliatory damage against a model that dares to attack them in melee. Njord once again has an ability that can potentially increase this retaliatory damage, both on the defense roll and on the defense roll when pushing, but more on that later. All in all, Ahlwardt is more capable of inflicting damage back to an attacker in melee than Njord is, but the difference between the two isn't enormous, and I do think that the most important part about defense is, well, defense. So I'm willing to give Njord the slightest of advantages in this category, since having a higher defense roll ups his effective effective defense output quite nicely in the long run. So I'm going to be giving the slight advantage to him. This means that the difference between our characters is back to a single point. Okay, let's get down to the skills and abilities boxes next, shall we? Interestingly enough, both of our Varang heroes over here have pretty similar command skills on their cards. Both have a once per round command skill that allows them to mitigate the effects of damage against them. Ahlwardt's Pendant of the Polar Bear Fang allows him to, at the beginning of his activation, heal 2 wounds and remove all the stress from Ahlwardt. This is great an ability in that it can allow Ahlwardt to chain activate, but then again Njord has access to a better, stronger chain activation mechanic, as we're about to see. And while Njord's Tattoo of the Blood Eagle has him rolling 2 orange dice and blocking once per round and blocking a damage that he would be receiving for each success rolled. Remember Elite over here. The fact of the matter is that Njord can use Tattoo of the Blood Eagle to stave off death against attacks that would otherwise slay him, while Ahlwardt needs to survive an attack to be able to then consequently activate Pendant of the Polar Bear Fang. Also, if Ahlwardt is full on stress, he cannot activate to use the ability unless he's able to rest, and if an enemy has engaged him, well then there goes that possibility out of the window. I also don't like how Ahlwardt's healing and stress management tools are bundled into one. This, in my experience, has often led to suboptimal use of either one. Either you're looking to keep chain activating and you want to shed stress, but Ahlwardt might not be wounded, and thus this command point spent will produce reduced value, or the other way around, you want to be healing Ahlwardt but there isn't stress to get rid of, so there goes that second half of the ability again. Then again, we do have to remember that Njord's Tattoo of the Blood Eagle will only cancel 2 points of damage about 56% of the time, and there is a 6% of the time, or if I remember correctly, 5.5 something like that percent of the time that he will actually fail to block any damage and he will go down even though the command skill has been activated. Let's refrain from grading this category before we have, or until we have taken a look at the passive skills that both characters also have access to, though. When it comes to Ahlwardt's passive skills, he does bring War Alliance to the party, and those not familiar with the context, War Alliance is the ability that allows Varang characters to join Orc units and Orc units to join Varang units. And as of right now, there are 2 models in the entire game that bring this ability along, and both are high command options. One is Ahlwardt Icebear and other one is his Orcish counterpart in the Wrathmane Aalborg. While I like War Alliance as an ability quite a lot, and I have been trying to list build with it more of late, I hate the fact that Ahlwardt can't make use of the ability himself. Since he is locked into accompanying a unit of polar bear totem skin changers, he is effectively losing the ability to make use of the War Alliance himself. This is not the case with Ahlwardt, however. He can indeed join a unit of Varangs, and in some instances this might be a union of convenience when there is a Varang unit without a character attachment and you simply throw Ahlwardt in there for some extra activation economy, or you might have a plan that involves escorting Ahlwardt to the middle or near the opponent's deployment zone via the use of a scout capable unit. But alas, these are not options available to Ahlwardt. The Ice Bear also has the passive skill Unbeatable, which means that he can avoid being pushed back even if he loses a melee combat without suffering a point of stress. Nice, cool, yeah, but if you are losing a combat with Ahlwardt, things are going a bit sideways anyway, aren't they? And at the same time, not being pushable back in this instance without suffering the point of stress, that is, on a Conquest 1 model, I don't think it's all that powerful. If a Conquest 2 plus unit is engaging you, they have already secured the objective that you are trying to contest if they were able to tow onto the Conquest zone. Yes, if you are able to block them from entering the zone in the first place, they can push and follow you into it no matter what, but I still think this is incredibly niche and an ability that doesn't get all that big value, that you don't get all that big value out of most of the time. Then again, when we look at the passive abilities of Njord, he has two what I consider to be quite powerful personal buffs. The first one, and to me the money maker, is Merciless, which means that Njord can inflict the frightened state against all enemies he's damaging in combat, and also as long as he inflicted at least a single point of damage when fighting, he is going to be shedding a point of stress at the end of combat. And this is rather amazing, an ability that can effectively mean that Njord can either keep chain activating until the cows come flying home, or he can effectively push for free each time because the stress will be immediately removed at the end of the combat if, and let's be totally real here, when Njord deals damage against whatever he is fighting. In addition to this, Njord has access to Totem of the Cavern Lion that ups Njord's combat performance as he takes wounds. After suffering a single wound, Njord becomes fearless. Note that Ahlwardt is and can never be as a solo model fearless, which is quite a inconvenience in some instances. And the first wound suffered by Njord also grants him the raging keyword, which means that he is going to inflict an additional automatic success in combat against enemies when he is charging. If and when Njord is down to his last wound, he also, in addition to the buffs already stated, gets to add a single red dice to both his attack and defense rolls. Remember also that Njord has access to Berserker Rage, so he has some ability to control how wounded he becomes if he can plan ahead, since Berserker Rage triggers after you have already reaped the benefits of any wounds Njord has suffered. And also the Tattoo of the Blood Eagle can keep even a single wound Njord fighting longer than otherwise could be expected. As a result of everything said and done over here, I'm going to be giving this category to Njord with +1 points. We are starting to see a difference here, are we not? Okay, that's the solo profiles analyzed. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty of the attached profiles of these two characters. And let's start with the leadership aspects. Both Njord and Ahlwardt are officers, so when they join a unit they effectively add a member to that said unit, which is particularly important for two-member units like, let's say, Varang skin changers, since this means that the unit will never be operating at its reduced profile, but rather it will be fighting with its full strength until the unit is destroyed, at which point the officer will detach and continue the fight on their own. Both also add a point of morale to their unit. Ahlwardt's card actually says that he supplants a morale value of 3 to the unit, so the unit loses their own morale and they get 3 instead, but essentially this means +1 morale because the skin changers, the only unit that Ahlwardt can join, are naturally morale 2, but keep this morale stat 3 in mind. I will be returning to that a bit later on. Njord gives a single point of morale to whatever unit he joins, but we do need to remember that he has very much a wider selection of units that he can join that can make use of this additional point of morale. While Ahlwardt brings a double orange willpower stat to the unit he joins and Njord only brings a orange and a yellow, unlike Ahlwardt, Njord does also add the Berserker Rage keyword to the unit, which means that they will be reliably passing their willpower tests as long as they are willing and able to suffer a wound to do so. So in this regard, I can't say that Ahlwardt is providing better willpower performance to his unit than Njord is. Njord does not add any conquest to the unit he joins, and nicely and surprisingly Ahlwardt does. But unfortunately this does not end up making much of a difference because the skin changers are naturally a conquest 0 unit, so bringing them up to conquest 1 means extremely little. Yes, you can capture points from under Conquest 0 enemies, and yes, if you're defending an objective, a Conquest 1 unit won't be able to capture it from underneath you, but when we get to the real Conquest values of 2 plus, Ahlwardt's 100 points of skin changers isn't going to be winning any contests with a Conquest value of 1. All in all, I am willing to consider the buffs in these regards as a wash between the two, so 0 points for both sides. When it comes to pure profile-based or attack section-based offensive output, Ahlwardt's additions to the unit are better. Njord provides an automatic success to his unit, and he provides a weakish push modifier that allows his unit to get another. While Ahlwardt's offensive output increase to the unit is more significant because he brings a red dice, which will with the switch that he brings along effectively mean an automatic success equivalent of damage all the time at least, and it can also provide additional symbols. In this case, what the skin changers are looking for is that spike damage of a double success on the red dice. As already alleviated too, Ahlwardt also brings a new switch ability to his unit that allows them to use hollow successes to cancel out enemy blocks. And this is pretty nice because it makes the skin changers semi-elite when using this switch ability. Ahlwardt's push modifier adds a single hollow special symbol to the roll, and in the case of the skin changers, this actually translates into a switch that inflicts an automatic wound upon the enemy, so it's clear to see that in this regard Ahlwardt is better, even though Njord has access to a wider selection of units that can make use of his offensive abilities. So I'm going to be giving this category solidly to Ahlwardt all the same. So there still is a chance that our noble Jarl can turn this contest to his advantage now, isn't there? Well, yes and no. When it comes to the base defensive improvements that Njord and Ahlwardt grant to their units, both add an automatic block symbol to the unit in question, and this is a symbol that is in high demand in the more offensively minded and defensively challenged Northern Tribes roster. But Ahlwardt does not bring any other defensive base benefits to his unit, while Njord grants them access to a red dice push modifier. If the unit already has a push modifier, they can endure 2 points of stress in order to trigger both, and this can lead to a devastating counterattack against a high value target looking to engage Njord's unit, while Ahlwardt cannot claim to be able to do the same for his unit of skin changers. This means that I have to give a slight advantage to Njord when it comes to the defensive category. And again, the score looks to be in the favor of the Merciless over the Ice Bear. All this brings us to the very final section to be analyzed, the attached profile related skills and abilities. The only passive buff that Ahlwardt grants his attached unit is the unbeatable that the solo Ahlwardt also had access to, and the same problem as before persists. The skin changers led by Ahlwardt are only a Conquest 1 unit, so not being able to get pushed back is a marginal boon in my opinion. Yes, with a unit of 3, there might be more chances for you to physically block opponents from reaching an objective, but that's pretty much the extent of the value that I see in this ability, and if you are defending with your skin changers, either the battle is going very bad or very, very good for you, and I don't know if this ability is the thing that will carry the day for you in the end. Then again, Njord grants his unit the all-important Berserker Rage ability, an ability that is, or a keyword rather, that is extremely versatile, a tool for attacking, passing willpower tests, interacting with scenario elements, feat elements, and sometimes it can even be used to produce additional damage on the defense. He also grants his unit the ability to inflict frightened state upon the enemies they damage via a watered down version of the Merciless, and he also grants his unit the ability to get a secondary reroll on charge attacks, this time choosing what dice to reroll. And after consulting some of my fellow wargamers, fellow travelers, I have come to understand that you can actually leverage both rerolls with Njord's unit. You can charge and then choose to reroll the whole thing if you don't like it, and then Hersir from Brynjalmar kicks in, and you get to then choose to reroll any number of dice that you choose, and that under the right circumstances can be quite devastating. As a result, I feel I have no choice but to give this category to Njord with a resounding 1.5 points added, which will end up giving us the score of 5.5 to 2.5 even when we isolate the points cost away from the analysis and we don't allow the Ahlwardt's poor ability to join units to track him down in every category that we have talked about. This all leads us to the final analysis then. In this humble Northern Tribes player's subjective and player viewpoint oriented look at things, it would unfortunately seem that Ahlwardt Icebear in his current October 2025 configuration is not a competitively costed and or designed profile. I understand and I respect the fact that Corvuspelli clearly has their internal guidelines on how to create and value these profiles, but my analysis here and I think the experiences of people playing seem to point to the fact that something is afoul here. While Ahlwardt Icebear is as cool a model as they come, I love the artwork and the stories about him in the source material, and he is important a factor for the flavor and the narrative of the faction. Unfortunately, there are simply far superior choices to include when building your Northern Tribes company. I would argue that in most cases, if you are looking to bring Ahlwardt, you can simply replace him with Njord and you will be getting more performance out of your character model even before we start to think about the cost of including that model included. If you are looking to leverage War Alliance, unfortunately, I have to concur that bringing Aalborg is the way to do that if you are looking to get as many victories as possible. But then again, hey, Ahlwardt can be made to work under the right circumstances. So if you feel like playing the game on the hard mode, then by all means go ahead and field Ahlwardt. Okay, so the finding of my analysis is that indeed I do consider Ahlwardt Icebear to be a suboptimal, a competitive choice when it comes to playing a game of Warcrow that you are looking to win at any any cost, essentially. What could we do in order to improve Ahlwardt to a point where people would be more incentivized to include him in their lists? Before going forward, I want to acknowledge that I am not a game designer. I have never been a game designer and I have no aspirations to be one going forward. But here are some humble grassroots ideas that could serve as a part of the solution to making Ahlwardt more appealing, a competitive pick going forward. I would imagine that Corvuspelli will be revisiting the profile at some point, maybe when a general release model, if and when one is coming, is going to be released. Here are the four things that I, in my very limited view, would consider to be something that Corvuspelli might be willing to, or maybe they should be looking at. First is reducing the cost of Ahlwardt Icebear. Currently, as shown by my subjective analysis, Ahlwardt is not a 60-point model. He is barely a 40-point model, if that. As we saw, he compared rather unfavorably to a 40-point model in Njord the Merciless in a great number of categories, and our scoring system scored Njord way higher than Ahlwardt in our end analysis. At the same time, we do need to remember that Njord isn't actually tearing up the tournament scene out there. You don't see people lamenting how overpowered Njord is, and if he's able to decisively outscore Ahlwardt in our analysis, then something is amiss when Ahlwardt costs 60 points. Yes, I know and I respect the fact that Corvuspelli's design team obviously has their own formula on how to generate the abilities and the points values of the units, but something has gone wrong here to get a 60-point model with this performance. Second thing that I would like to have looked at is, would it be so bad to have Ahlwardt lead all infantry units in the same way that Aalborg can? This would make his War Alliance ability more impactful and usable, and the fact that he is giving that morale 3 to a unit would become indefinitely more, or infinitely rather, more interesting, because that would allow you to get morale 3 orc hunters or morale 3 tundra marauders or something of this nature, which would be really cool. It would so much open up new possibilities for list building with Ahlwardt, when you could plug him to any unit in the list and then create an interesting combination in that way, maybe looking to escort Ahlwardt effectively to the enemy lines, or maybe leveraging his limited performance improvements granted by his attached profile to make an interesting and powerful a combination. So that's something that I would be really interested to have a look at. I also think that the basis on this, the validation for this, can be found in the backstory. The backstory makes it a big deal that skin changes usually are pretty feral, untrustworthy, and animalistic, especially when in combat, and they are hard to rely on. They act in ways that are unpredictable and not always to the liking of the commander utilizing them. But Ahlwardt is famous for keeping a cool head and keeping his wits and his wisdom and his intelligence with him, even when he shapeshifts into a polar bear. Why then couldn't he lead another type of infantry unit? Why must he join the frothing at the mouth skin changers if indeed he himself isn't like that when combat is joined? Third change that I would like to see is allowing the pendant of the polar bear fang to remove all wounds from Ahlwardt. We have way more powerful command skill abilities in the game as of right now, and Ahlwardt is already capped at using this ability once in a round. How terrible would it be for him to heal 3 or maybe 4 wounds? With a green and a blue dice, yes, with elite, but still defense, he is going to get wounded, he is going to get killed, so what's the harm in giving him a bit more powerful a healing ability to keep him in the fight a tad longer? We do need to also remember that his, as stated previously, his stress management tool is locked into the same ability, forcing suboptimal choices on the Northern Tribes player already. How bad would it be to allow him to heal more wounds while at it? Last one, and the one that I think I'm most in love with out of all my things, beyond the second one, allowing him to lead all infantry units, is the fourth one. And that is, I feel that Ahlwardt should have a force-wide buff that he grants to all Varank units. The backstory makes it a big deal how respected leader Ahlwardt is, how all the Varanks are eager to, or at least the Varanks under him, are eager to follow him, how they look up to him, how he is a wise and powerful a commander, but at the same time he doesn't actually do anything for the Varank troops other than allows orc characters to join them and Varanks to join orcs, and that doesn't feel like the greatest Varank leader out there, outsourcing the jobs to the orc side of the alliance in a way. So many people are feeling that the Varank units could use something of a buff. I don't necessarily agree in all instances, but I think that this might be a cool chance for a force that wants to be more based around Varanks to get some type of buff, and it would also validate running Ahlwardt as your high command, giving way more depth to the company construction of a Northern Tribes faction. The fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, that most of the buffs and synergies that we have going in the Northern Tribes are between Orcish units. And while mixing and matching units via War Alliance is cool, there's no denying that Varangs are by far the lesser of the two sides of the coin as of right now, as is obviously intended, but even so, having some kind of force-wide buff would be really cool, and I trust that CP could make it something interesting, something fun, and something that could transform the company construction of Northern Tribes forces going forward. Phew, I have been losing my voice, so it's great that I have now managed to struggle to the end of this video. I will now get off my soapbox. I will thank you all for listening to the rants and raves of a Northern Tribes enthusiast. I will end this video by saying to all you fellow travelers, safe travels, and save the ice bear, save the dream. Goodbye for now.